Good afternoon. I am a little earlier than usual. I got stuff I need to get done, so I figured I'd just go ahead and get this out of the way. Samuel Reichert here. That I'm pretty sure most of you guys, if you're here, you know who I am. I'm going to try things a little different than usual. Instead of going on for what seems like forever at the beginning of the video, we're going to go over a few small things. I'll get the live reading done. That way for people that can't sit here for the full 30-45 minutes, as long as it takes. We'll get the book done, and then I will go into other stuff there at the end. So that will be coming. I'm going to be formatting these a little differently than I have been. The only real thing, Bonnie is a friend of mine, and she's also the inspiration for the character Rael at the end of book 2. Just want to say congratulations to her. She will be getting married next weekend. So, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to attend the wedding, as I have a book signing in Bell, Missouri on Friday, and then one in St. Louis on Sunday. So, but I'm going to pay my respects to the funeral or all that shit prior. Yeah, that's that. We've got some birthday stuff that I've done privately, but anyway, we'll get on this and then be on our way. Chapter 3, The Bigger They Are. The pitted iron bars were coated in a thin layer of flaky rust. Crennan's thick, green hands were locked around them, watching the spectacle upon the other side. The large human straddled the defeated Alfar. Reaching down, he grabbed the agile creature's matted brown hair. Lifting his head up, the human drug his sword across the Alfar's throat, cutting him to the spine. The dead creature dropped, his face slamming into the damp sand. Roars filled the air at the scene. They couldn't get enough blood to sate their appetite. The half-orc released the bars. Inspecting the red dust clinging to his skin, he wiped them together and turned to secure his twin axes. The keen weapons were polished to a shine, sunlight gleaming on the edge. He'd grown fond of the weapons, forged from the great sword his brothers had given him. He shook the memories from his head. They wouldn't serve him here. Staring down at the lightweight weapons, he could nearly feel their desire for blood, the same desire the crowd craved. Returning his attention to the arena, the thick chains clinked along the huge sprocket, raising the portcullis. He watched the human approach. His beady eyes were locked upon him. The man's bronze skin was shiny, probably partially from sweat, but it was more than that. He looked as if he'd been oiled from head to toe. His face bore no emotion, simply a lingering glare that burned into the half-orc's soul. Crennan couldn't help but feel like the man wanted to lunge out at him. His eyes followed the man until he was out of sight. He stared out into the gold, blood-soaked sands and marched up the ramp. The roar of orc cheers funneled into his ears. Guttural laughter and joy washed over him, filling him with a sense of bliss. He reached the center of the large stadium and threw his axes into the air, greeting his audience. They erupted at the jester, shouting their praise. The portcullis clanked open on the far side of the arena, alerting him to his opponent's entry. He turned to see who he'd be fighting today. It was always a surprise. If he could prepare, it would make the whole process much smoother. But as it was, he never knew until they took the sands. The gate opened wide, and yet nobody passed through. The crowd grew restless, booing the absence of his opponent. I have to do something. They grow tired and lose excitement. Raising his axes once again, he shouted to them, letting his words silence their chants. Seems like the mighty Crennan too scary for them. They hide in their cell, pissing themselves. These little things in life were worth fighting for, he thought. They roared louder than ever, receiving his boast. It was short-lived. A massive quake echoed through the sands, shaking the very ground beneath them. Locked in silent anticipation, they stared intently at the large opening at the far side. Crennan turned to face the monster, slowly making its way into the sands. How could such a beast even fit through the tunnels was a mystery to him, or was a mystery in and of itself. He could hear the heartbeat pumping away inside him, not so much Not so much a gasp could be heard from the spectators. Only the thundering footsteps of the approaching behemoth sounded. He'd never seen one of its type before. It was twice the size of the largest orc and drug what appeared to be a huge club that may as well have been the lower section of a tree. Even the thick ridges along its sides and head reminded him of tree roots. Processing the sight, Krenin could see the crowd out of the corner of his eye. They returned to their usual primitive selves, though he couldn't hear them. Only the beat of the drum in his chest and the earth-shattering footfalls around him. He was frozen in the sight. How could such a creature exist? He'd been told about all manner of beasts, but he'd never seen. But this one couldn't begin to compare to those that he had seen. Memories flashed back to him, recalling a specific book Ravian had been looking through. He hadn't paid much attention at the time, but he saw a picture of a massive beast. It was a mountain troll, if memory served, and this one looked a bit different. It had dark green skin and layers of moss for hair. If they were named by region, if they were named by the region they resembled, this one had to be a forest troll. His will to live growing within him, Krenin gripped his weapons, feeling his knuckles pop around the leather-wrapped bindings. Taking a deep breath, he prepared himself for the fight of his life. The troll spotted the small orc in the center of the arena, as if he somehow awoke its brutish nature. It let out an earth-shattering roar, drowning out the echo of the crowd. Raising the tree-like club, it charged. Krenin let his rage grow, feeling each thundering step barreling toward him. The sand surrounding him hopped from the massive weight impacting them. His heart pounded in time to beat the matching. His heart pounded in time to the beat matching its rhythm. That was hard to say. Watching the behemoth, he waited for the perfect moment. Now! He broke position and charged straight toward the beast, releasing his own battle cry. He watched the thick club as if it were moving in slow motion. A single impact would likely kill him. The huge wooden weapon slammed down. Jumping just before it connected, Krenin felt the wind from the impact rush around him. His feet landed atop the massive cudgel, balancing ever so slightly. Refusing to wait a moment longer, he ran up the weapon and jumped, bringing his axes around. Chunks of damp sand flew in the air from the impact. The troll saw the tiny orc in the air headed straight toward him. Bringing his hand up, he swatted at him, knocking him from the sky like a bee in search of honey. The sharp edges of the chopping blade bit into his arm, shooting pain throughout his body. Anger on the rise, the troll recovered, ripping the club from the sand. As soon as he found the orc, he was going to crush him. Krenin crashed into the sand. He had to have drawn blood, but it was too soon to tell. The swat came out of nowhere. He jumped to his feet, knowing he didn't have much time. Fortune favored him. He was behind the creature. Heaving his axe as he brought them down, sinking the blades into the troll's back. Bright green blood erupted from the wounds coating his weapons. Ripping them free, the back spray splattered across his face. Bright green spray in the deep contrast to his darker skin tone. The troll howled in pain, spinning around to find the tiny orc. Raising his club, he reared back to crush the pest. It moved much faster than he'd expected. Momentarily frozen at the sight of the approaching club, Krenin tried to move but couldn't. He was too close. Regaining control of his body, he lunged, hoping to avoid the blow as best he could. The tree-like trunk caught him in the side, launching him off the ground. Krenin felt the air rush from him. He couldn't breathe. Fighting through the air, he felt the numerous pops inside him. Flying through the air, he felt the numerous pops inside him. No doubt his ribs were broken. He landed roughly on the arena floor, the momentum carrying him through the wet sand. Every part of him hurt, but it told him he was alive. If he didn't get up, he wouldn't feel anything much longer. Forcing himself to his feet, he spit the sand from his mouth and exhaled in short, rapid breaths, trying to control his body. The adrenaline was rushing through him. It would keep him going a while longer, but it did little for the pain. His muscles tensed and his bones cracked. Taking his first breath, he forced his eyes to remain open. Turning to find the troll, he spotted his axes lying in the sand where he'd been standing. The troll watched the little orc fall to his back several feet away. To his surprise, he rolled over and got back up. Roaring his anger, he spat his twisted words at the orc. Poop kabe dia raku iga fucking other words. There we go. Crinan forced the pain aside. Clearing his head of all distractions, he recited Malachi's words. A clouded mind is a dead mind. He had to get his weapons if he was going to survive. Don't know what you say and don't care. You going to die. The troll approached the defiant orc and raised his club to finish the job. There was no way he could withstand another blow. Crinan felt the shadow engulf him, long before the brute was standing within striking distance. He looked up at the ugly green-head silhouette in the bright sunlight. It made it difficult to see anything, but it was better than being completely blinded. He watched the club raised, ready to deliver the final blow. The crowd fell silent, awaiting the fate of the half-breed. He'd done so much to bring them entertainment. It would be a shame for him to fall, but that was the life of a gladiator. Some would win big from his death, others would go into debt. It was orcish politics in the north. Had the lesser races known the true extent of their ambitions, there was no way they'd think them nothing but muscled brutes. Crinan watched the club, waiting for the right moment. He might die, but that day would not be this one. The club rocketed down, aimed for his head. The half-orc dove between the troll's legs, ignoring his pain at all cost. Throwing every ounce of strength into a single blow, Crinan slammed his shoulder into the creature's crotch. The club slammed down, showering sand atop them both. Raku cried out in pain. Dropping the club, he grabbed himself, hoping to dull the throbbing ache. The axes were still too far away. He had no doubt of that. He couldn't lift the club, even on his best day. Out of options, he spun around and jumped onto the troll's back, throwing his arms around its midsection as best he could. His arms weren't quite long enough to lock his grip, but perhaps he could hold on long enough to do some damage. Squeezing as hard he could, he felt several pops erupt from his sides. An unbearable pain exploded inside him. He couldn't tell if it was more ribs breaking or the already broken ones resetting. It didn't matter, it hurt either way. Holding his breath to keep from passing out, he continued to squeeze. He had to weaken the beast if he was going to survive. Raku regained his composure when he felt the orc latch onto him. He wasn't sure how he was going to get him off. He couldn't reach back to grab him, and there was no way to get him without hurting himself. He could try flinging him off, or he could crush him under his weight. Lying down, he could possibly give the tiny orc a chance to do something tricky, and he'd already proven he was faster. His decision made, Raku flailed about trying to throw the orc off of him. It was no use. He was attached too tightly. Howling his frustration, a rush of anxiety flooded him with the unwanted growth. Crinan strained to keep his hold. He was growing tired and his grip was slipping. If the beast kept flinging him about like that, he was going to fall. Running out of time, he scanned for his axes. They were close, but still out of reach. Out of options, he buried his face into the creature's armpit. The stench made him want to vomit, but it was nothing compared to what he was about to do. Opening his mouth wide, he bit down on the soft flesh, ripping his head from side to side. Bright green blood erupted in his mouth, filling it as he tore a chunk of flesh away. It tasted nearly as bad as it smelt. Spitting the chunk of meat into the sand, he couldn't get the oily taste out of his mouth. Unable to get away, the troll roared in pain. He had to escape the pest's reach. Or he had to get away. He had to get away. That doesn't. I need to fix this book a little bit. He had to get out of the pest reach. Lost in panic, he charged toward the side wall, hoping he could smash it against it. In his panic, he didn't see the club at his feet. Tripping over the thick wooden weapon, he slammed his face into the sand head first. Feeling gravity shift, Crinan let go. Now was his chance. He rolled away from the troll, letting him fall in solitude. Rushing over, he snatched up his axes and spun around, hoping he could finish the beast before it could get back up. Raku rolled to his side and reached under his arm. He was able to feel the edge of the torn area just out of reach to soothe his pain. Careful to keep the sand out of the wound, he pushed the blood-soaked ground, trying to pick himself up. Crinan charged, jumping as high as he could. He prepared the keen edges to strike deep. The creature buckled under the unexpected weight as he landed on the troll's back. Letting loose, Crinan swung hard, burying the blades deep into the beast's neck. The troll felt a sharp pain cut into the base of his skull. He tried throwing his attacker from him, but it was too late. The second axe had found its mark. Crinan stood atop the dying troll. His fists were locked around the submerged axes. The first was embedded in its spine, the second stuck between the vertebrae, passing straight through flesh and bone. The troll's head rolled from his shoulders, bouncing on the sand before coming to a rest a few feet away. A pool of bright green ichor leaked out, soaking into the already moist ground. The crowd erupted in cheers, amazed by the battle they'd just witnessed. Crinan plucked his axes free and tried to raise them, but they were too heavy. Exhausted and full of pain, he felt them slip from his grip. Head sinking into the head sunk into the churned sand. He left them behind and marched weakly towards the portcullis. A general breeze caressed the waist-high stalks of brown wheat, making them dance in unison. It was a calming roar, one you wouldn't notice without listening. Agonizing screams echoed through the tear, filling the open plains with despair. The shimmering orange crack appeared in the air, ripping apart the fabric of reality. It widened, allowing room for a single man to pass. Excuse me. Perryman stumbled through the magic vortex, tripping in the tall grass. Pulling himself up, he pushed through, clenching the mask sealed against his face. How could I have failed? It wasn't my fault. I couldn't stop it. A trampled path followed in his wake. Struggling against the latched appendage, the voices echoed out in retort, taunting his already fragile sanity. You failed. He's coming. Why didn't you stop him? Unable to take the abuse, he dug his fingers beneath the edge, hoping to dislodge the source of his torment. His head throbbed against the echoing chorus, refusing to abandon him. His nails cut into his jawline, but he found the nearly seamless edge. Forcing every ounce of will into a single cognitive purpose, Perryman pried the mask from his skin. It wasn't my fault! The golden shroud peeled away, growing easier with each passing moment. The voices silenced, leaving him to himself. Pulling the mask free, the red and blue tendrils atop his head shriveled and disappeared. His brown duster faded away, leaving the tattered and aged robes of white and gold in its place. The aging wizard tightened his hand into a fist, forcing his body to obey for the first time and as long as he could remember. Feeling the controlling power, free of the controlling power, he felt vulnerable in himself. One he'd never noticed before. Or he felt a vulnerability in himself, one he had never noticed before. He was a weak old man. While his years of study had trained him in the arcane arts, making him one of the most powerful magi in Dalmora, it was a candle compared to the sunlight the mask provided. Dropping to his knees, he stared up into the reflective sunlight, feeling the rays upon his face. The relevance was not lost on him. Perryman tensed, accepting the sudden freedom bestowed upon his broken mind. It was a blessing and a curse. To be free meant responsibility, which in itself was a prison. The truth was there was no such thing as true freedom, only shades of illusion. True freedom was true chaos, and the question became, how much was it worth? He glanced down, seeing the wicked Chris tucked into his waistline. Drawing the blade, he could feel the darkness within it. begging him, pleading him to use it. Were he inexperienced in resisting such temptations, he had no doubt the blade would have claimed its next victim. Stuffing the weapon back into his sash, he exhaled, letting the stress fade away. The wind embraced him, gently caressing his face. A shadow in the back of his mind demanded attention. Acknowledging its presence, the realization of his actions hit him. He's coming. I need to let the tower know. Sighing deeply, he pushed himself up, decided in his future. Turning west, Perryman pressed the mask against his face, letting it thrust its freedom upon him once again. The golden, expressionless cover enveloped his head completely, locking itself to him. The red and blue tendrils sprung with force, resuming their ever-seeking dance. His clothing shifted, reverting back into the brown leather duster. He knew what needed to be done, but he couldn't do it like this. As if the thought were a command, the duster morphed, taking a fluid-like appearance. His gold and white robes returned, though not the tarnished, stained ones he had been wearing. These were long and elegant, seemingly new. The power flowed through them like a sheet of water in constant flux around his body. The mask and cap faded into him, revealing his round, freshly shaven face and shoulder-length hair, groomed in the sun-faded brown. The receded hairline left a slight peak in the center of his aging face, though years of his youth returned. Knowing where he needed to go, the wizard took a single step toward his destination. The orange crack appeared, and as quickly as he had arrived, he was gone. Stepping from the swirling energies, Perryman marched through the arched doorway, ignoring the guards posted on either side. Walking through the reception hall, he didn't bother looking at the decor. It hadn't changed in centuries. Such admirations belonged to the apprentices and visitors. Ignoring the receptionist, he stepped into the teleportation shaft. Picturing the destination in his head, he felt the energy swirl around him. Turning around, he marched out into the expansive chamber filled with tomes and scrolls as far as the eye could see. "Perryman?" Uriel asked, rushing over to take his brother's hand. "I've come to warn you. The corruption has been released. It's already begun to spread into the realm. The tower will not be around much longer." Uriel paused, studying his brother's face. He'd been gone over a decade, yet his youth had reversed. Something was different about him, but it was clearly him. The fact he'd been able to enter the chamber without a summons was proof enough. "Brother, tell me, how did you come by this knowledge? When last we spoke, your mind was broken from the weight of the crown." "I'm not here to talk about my time as Baron," Perryman snapped, slamming his fist down on a pile of books. It was no wonder the tower's reputation had diminished over the years. They were always overanalyzing everything instead of taking immediate action. "Something must be done. I can feel the tendrils lashing out, wrapping themselves around the base of stones. You must act." The magistrate looked his aged brother up and down. "You don't feel like yourself, but I've learned enough to know when to take your advice and when to turn cheek. I will do as you ask." Uriel placed his hand against his brother's shoulder, giving a reassuring pat. I'll look into the oculus. Perhaps I'll be able to find this corruption before it sets in." He released the elder mage and turned toward the shaft. Spinning around, he looked upon his brother once again. "Perryman, I'm glad you're back. This place hasn't been the same without you." Uriel disappeared in the swirling light. Wasting no time, Perryman pulled the hidden dagger, laying it upon the table. Running his hand over the wavy blade, he closed his eyes, focusing his energies. An image came to him, an image of a man familiar yet concealed. "He's in Krondar." Snatching up the dagger, he stuffed it away, allowing the dark torrent to surround him. Energy spinning, he vanished. And that is the end of Chapter 3. So, we will continue Chapter 4 next Sunday. I'll be in St. Louis. So, if I'm able to read Chapter 4, it will be later. Yeah, because I'll be in St. Louis, so it'll probably be 10 o'clock or so before I get back. So, if I can find time to do it while I'm in St. Louis, I will. If I can't, then we may just have to skip it next week. As I said at the beginning, I am going to try to do these videos a little different than I have been. I spend too much time working up to the book. I need to just get into the content. That way you guys can get on with your lives if you want to. And if not, you know, I'll still be here. But as far as recent news, like I said, I've got my book signing in Bell, Missouri next Saturday, and then one in St. Louis on Sunday. So I've got those. The Bell one is at Barb's Books, is a little bookstore up there, and then the Toy Man Toy Show is the St. Louis appearance. So those are that. As far as online stuff, I have uploaded all the videos to YouTube, so you can follow them there. In fact, I would prefer you did, because the more content I can get across the board, or more activity I can get, the better things will be all around, and get some cross-promotion going. Still working on getting the websites all straightened out. I want everything in one place instead of having to jump to 5 or 6 different places to manage all of my online stuff. Blog post is already written. I'll have one post tomorrow, and then I've already got next week's written as well. I've been remaining about 2 weeks ahead for the last month or so. But yeah, pretty much just Google Samuel Reichert, and pretty much all of my pages should pop up with that. Website, blog, YouTube, pretty much all of them. But anyway, things will be changing in these. I am going to start making them more a tool rather than just something I do. But I guess if you guys would, have a good evening, and we will talk to you soon. And keep your eyes open for Order of the Trident 3, because it'll be out as soon as possible. Bye.